Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Super Feeler podcast. My name is Lori, and I'm super excited today to be joined by Meredith Meyer, who is from the DBT-Linehan Board of Certification, which is very exciting. I recently took a DBT kind of course, and they were talking like so much about how compliant DBT is so important. And I have so many questions, and I'm very curious from the DBT-LBC's experience with that. Before we get started, I just want to thank our new Patreon subscribers, Juliana and Becca. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Really appreciate it. And with that, let's get into it. So, Meredith, do you want to just tell us about yourself as like a person, a clinician? Like what brings you to DBT?
Absolutely. And thank you. Thank you for having me. Let's see. Where do I start? I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm based out of California. I'm in San Diego specifically. And I work with a team we're kind of spread out throughout California. We used to be all Northern California based, called Pacific DBT Collaborative. So together we provide comprehensive DBT services for adults, hopefully expanding to adolescents in the near future. I've been practicing DBT since I was a student. So I first came into learning about DBT during my grad school time. So that was back in 2012, I believe, is when I first started. And it's really interesting. I think as a student, you're exposed to so many different theories and like different models, and you're a sponge, you're taking in so much. And it's hard to know what's going to stick. And I think at the time I kind of felt that. I'm like, there's just like so much. Like, what am I going to end up doing? I'm not really sure. And I had a lovely supervisor who just brought me into the DBT world. Sometimes I like to say threw me into the DBT world, but very willingly, because I was ready to learn, I was ready to get in there. And so part of my training is I first sat in and observed a DBT skills group. And it was an adult skills group. And then after you observe for like roughly 1 round of skills, so around the 6-month mark, you then start participating. So I would run the mindfulness component, get off and running. And I just had this, I feel like it's like a life-changing moment when I look back and Meredith, pre-DBT skills.
Yep.
And Meredith after DBT skills. And then comparatively, that I had been in other groups doing other modalities. And there was something that was I felt that was very special about the skills group, the way people were in the room. Very authentic, very real, there to just soak up the material and then to take it and see people use it and then come back and oh my gosh, I had such a different experience. I didn't know I could have this.
Mm-hmm.
And then I myself was living it too. So there was something, even though everyone was there working on different things, there was something at the core that was very human, very relatable, and really powerful. And then I just have been bought in ever since.
And that's the thing is you don't have to have you don't have to have borderline personality disorder to benefit from these skills. These skills are so valuable for every human being on earth. So I can totally see that if you're thrown into a skills group, you go, wait, I can apply this to my life too. I'm not just here as a clinician.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So I noticed the big changes in my life at that time, and then just continued on. And one thing I tell my skills group a lot is I've been teaching skills now for, I guess this would be 13 years of teaching skills. And I've clinically, I've kind of gotten tired with some material or gotten felt like I've had times of burnout in different areas of my clinician experience. But skills group is a very unique little gem where I haven't had that experience. And I find something, it's almost I find something new every time I teach it. Totally. One, it keeps me engaged in the material, but then two, when I teach it, I'm oh, wow. Now at this stage of my life, applying the skills is still applicable in a slightly different way. So it really just keeps me I'm just so curious about that. And I love that. So it keeps me engaged in it.
I found my certification. It's not a certification, but a certificate from when I finished DBT the first time. And it was from 2015. So it's been 10 years since I've been practicing DBT. And I learn something new all the time. And I'm so immersed in DBT. So, kind of associated with this podcast, we run a peer support group, and sometimes people will bring up skills that I completely forgot about. And then we've been doing a podcast series about DBT skills where we there's 4 to 5 of us where we go through and talk about how we each use skills, or if we don't at all, or why. And every single person's perspective is so unique. And you're just I will never get bored of learning about DBT skills because there's always these intricacies that you don't realize, or like these interconnections.
Yes.
And it's just fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for context, so I did dialectical behavior therapy. I realized we probably should have said that at the beginning, that that's the acronym DBT. I did it.
Yes, always good to do that at least once. Right?
I know, that's exactly what I think. I'm like, realistically, anybody that's listening to this podcast knows what that acronym is, but just in case. So yeah, I did it through kind of like the public health system in Canada. And so it was only groups. So I've actually never done comprehensive DBT, which is one of the things that I'm so interested in, is because I benefited so much from just the skills that I don't even, to me, I'm like, I don't even think I would need comprehensive DBT. We'll get into that later when we talk about why comprehensive DBT is important. But
for sure.
I'm really curious. So you're a marriage and family therapist, kind of primarily. That's what you did your master's in and all that.
Yeah.
Is DBT particularly helpful in marriage and family counseling? Do you use that for that kind of part of your work, or is it usually for individuals who have like suicidality, self-harm, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, the answer is both. So my licensing, like the umbrella, is marriage and family therapy, but really like a lot of my training was primarily working with individuals, but I do have experience working with couples and families, and I love working with couples and families, as well as individuals. Everyone. Love everyone.
I just love everything.
But oh my gosh, absolutely. DBT, so really like that foundation of, if I think of it kind of like stylistically, like how it shows up in the room, or kind of helps create structure for like a therapy session, is really bringing in the balance of working towards change. So you can think about a lot of skills that are really change oriented, doing things differently. So finding people's like kind of growth edges, like what do you need to do differently? Like what's no longer serving you? How can we work with that, be with that in a different way? And at the same time, how could we also hold acceptance of what is and tolerating what is?
Right.
And I think couples work, how relevant is that? Couples that need to do things differently, but also work on accepting maybe part of their own patterns of their ways of engagement with each other, accepting
that their other person, exactly, that sometimes you can't change your partner in the way that you want them to.
And then the same thing's applicable, right, for parenting, or family systems in general, even if it's not that like typical parent dynamic of having a young child, even as we grow, and those dynamics exist and change over time. So the same principles apply, just at a very like base level.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's also helpful for the families to all understand the same skills, like even interpersonal skills. I mean, you look at like Dear Man. I've used Dear Man on my family more than I've used it on anyone else. And, you know, my husband is like amazing, and he's has literally never been to therapy in his entire life, which is horrible. Never do that. That's a horrible thing to do. But I can't force somebody to do something that I want them to do. But he is so like neurotypical and amazing. And he's kind of embraced so many of the skills, like especially like the tip skill, opposite action, like all of these things that he may not even really know the name for, but they're so incorporated into our lives that I'm sure they benefit both of us. And him knowing them definitely benefits me when I'm in a crisis.
Absolutely. I'm going to name drop here 2 resources that I absolutely love. One is NEA BPD, which is the National Education Alliance for Borderline Personality Disorder. The LBC actually is in partnership with them.
Cool. I've heard amazing things about them.
Yeah. One of their missions is getting skills to family members. So they offer a free online skills-based group for anyone who knows anyone with like emotion dysregulational difficulties. And then specifically, they have groups tailored towards people who have experienced a suicide in their family, or someone that they love or that they know. And it's amazing. What it is like basically some of the core content of the skills just distilled down in a kind of in a condensed version. So people have the same skills, or the same verbiage for the skills, right? Totally. And like people
speaking the same language.
That alone is so powerful, right? Like, oh, my friend is doing DBT and now I know some of the same language, or my daughter's doing this and now when she says I want to do Dear Man, I know what she's referring to.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Or like my son, right? Like, you know, it's just become so workable. It gives people the same platform. And then the other one is Alan Frizzetti. He does a lot of work with couples and families. Center for DBT and Families is his center. Yeah.
Awesome.
So he does like the high conflict couple. I believe he's on the East Coast.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
But there's
so much cool stuff out there.
There's a lot. There's a lot.
Which is amazing because 10 years ago, there wasn't. Truly. It's changed. The landscape has changed so much since when I was trying to survive. It's very different.
Yeah. And that's what I really appreciate. Podcasts makes, especially these longer formats where someone can just drop in and start listening. It just makes the content more accessible. Where before, I think, 10 years ago, it's harder to, you're right. It's harder to find.
Yeah.
And find it in a meaningful way. Yeah.
Yeah. Or something that is more visually appealing. There's so many more beautiful DBT books now. And Marsha Linehan is a hero of mine, but her books are not particularly beautiful. It's a lot of black and white text, right? And I think at the time that's what it was, right? We didn't have Canva to design books for us. That was really easy to do.
Yeah.
But now there's so many amazing options for people who are more visual learners or more story learners or
absolutely
don't have some of the language and some of the original DBT stuff. If you're in crisis and have a grade 7 education, it's going to be hard to understand really what is going on. And so I think there's a lot of simplification that's happened, which is awesome. So yeah. And I learned off of all the original Linehan stuff, and I still have all the books in my closet here, and I love them to pieces. Nice. But yeah, it's just I love that the world is kind of right. It's embracing it. Yeah, right.
We love the core content, and we can
do something different. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you got it.
And everybody learns differently, so I think it's really cool what's going on. So could you explain a little bit about the role of the DBT Licensing Board Certificate Linehan? Wow, let me say that one more time. DBT Linehan Board of Certification. Could you share a little bit about it? Is totally. But I'm also I don't want to just say DBT-LBC because then nobody's going to know what we're talking about. So the Dialectical Behavior Therapy Linehan Board of Certification. Do you want to tell us what that is, why it's important?
You got it. Yeah, absolutely. So, well, a little quick, the origin story for this one. And I don't have the exact timelines. I don't have the exact date for this, but somewhere along the lines, I would say maybe early 2000s, after the first trials were coming out showing that DBT is effective. It's really started getting some momentum underneath the theory and using it clinically. Someone had asked Marsha, well, how do you know if people are doing DBT as it was designed, as you maybe saw the vision or saw the model in your mind? And that was the beginning of her thinking about, well, how do we know that? We don't really know. We know how people are being trained, and we know what materials out there, but then there's no way of kind of looking at that. So that was the beginning of trying to formulate a certifying body that has a kind of a stamp of approval or certification, saying you have shown your work, you demonstrated your work, you've shown up, you've taken a test demonstrating your knowledge base. You have experience being in comprehensive DBT and providing it, and therefore you meet the qualifications for providing DBT as it was designed. Is the kind of shorter way of thinking about it.
Totally. And then for people who may not know what comprehensive DBT even means, do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for comprehensive DBT, there's 4 components, and all those components have to be occurring in order for it to be considered the comprehensive version of DBT. So sometimes people will get just one piece of it, and it's still DBT, but it's just not the comprehensive kind of the full package. I like to think about it. So there's the 4 components. The first component would be people sign up. When people onboard for a DBT program, they're usually committing to weekly individual sessions. So kind of traditional in the sense of what people typically think of when they think of doing therapy is those weekly sessions. And in addition to their weekly sessions with their therapists, they participate in the skills training group. So when you go off of the core curriculum or the original skills curriculum, that's like, you're looking at like roughly 6 months to get through all the skills once. Best practice, I would say, is usually around 2 rounds of skills.
Yeah.
I know you said that you're familiar with skills, and I feel like I lived this experience too. That first round, I feel like is so much like onboarding. You're getting so much material.
For sure.
It's very analytical, right? Like you're like thinking about it. Oh, it makes sense on paper, or like, oh yeah, like I can maybe say it back to you. But then it's the other thing to really live it and then acquire that skill.
I don't think I understood the concept of dialectics until like 7 years in. Like truly, so I like so live and breathe DBT, but I just never understood dialectics and like what it really meant and why until literally like practicing this in my life for 7 years. Because when I was first going into DBT, I was in significant crisis, right? I did not have the ability to really deeply think about the like just kind of underlying concept of DBT. It was, how am I going to not kill myself? How am I not going to go to jail? How am I going to retain housing? Right? And so at that time, things like radical acceptance, radical acceptance was huge for me. Dear Man was huge for me. But then now, and I also hated mindfulness so much. I hated it. I thought it was the stupidest thing in the entire universe when I was first going through DBT. Now I go to yoga like 7 days a week. I meditate before a bunch of like presentations that I have to do. I think it's the most beautiful thing in the world. But you're not necessarily in the right headspace to like get to all of that stuff. And so when somebody's telling you to like eat a fig in the middle of the hospital, you're like, I don't want to mindfully eat this fig. Thank you very much. Now it's like, anyways, it's just such I totally see the value in doing it twice, because how could you possibly really get everything that's going on? Even 4 times, I feel like you could still be learning new things.
Well, and I like where we started this conversation where you mentioned like doing like or if I could rewind the tape just a little bit, where you talked about peer support groups.
Yeah.
There is such a need for when people are, let's say like they graduated from skills training, so they did it a couple times, maybe they're ready to move on from like that really like structure that a comprehensive program can provide, but they still want to engage in skills.
Yeah.
And there's so much learning. And like we talked about, like when your life changes and you're at a different stage of your life, you're going to relate to the skills in a different way, or maybe skills that like weren't really applicable when you first came into it. Now you're at a place like your baseline's different and what you're wanting to access is so different. So there's such a need for like that kind of ongoing, kind of think of it as like advanced groups or just advanced skills support, where it's not your first time hearing it, but it's more of that living and life experience with the skills.
Yeah, and hearing other people's life experience with the skills that's where my passion for peer support came up. Is after my DBT skills group, we were kind of cut off from our services, just because of the way that the system worked. And so we all met in the food court of the mall for like a year on Wednesday afternoons after DBT was closed, which you're not supposed to do, but we did it anyways. And I still, 10 years later, talk to some of these people, and it brought this passion for peer support that I like ran with, and it's, what I do now. And I love seeing people, because our peer support group, you don't have to have gone through DBT or even have a BPD diagnosis, even though like 99% of the people that come do. But there's also people that have not had access to DBT that are learning the skills through the interactions they're having with their peers, which is so cool too. Anyways, that's my soapbox. I love peer support. Sorry. So skills groups, you do it either once or twice. 6 months to a year-ish, give or take, depending on the program.
Yes. Yeah. And again, like the timing of that can be different, like per person. I usually tell people that when they're like onboarding with us. So like, just depending on what's going on in your life, what your treatment goals are, what your target behaviors are, the time may differ, but the components still stay the same to make it a comprehensive program. So once someone is onboarded in skills training, then they have access to the third component, which is having your therapist be accessible for phone coaching. And so 24/7 for phone coaching is the guideline here to be considered comprehensive. So there's a lot of people who practice DBT may do modifications there. Some people have like hours when they do coaching, but to be a certified program and to be providing comprehensive, that 24/7 is actually a really crucial part. And there's lots of different metaphors here, but the core emphasis is that when someone's learning to acquire those skills and we're learning to do something different, the hope is that instead of going to target behavior, we can reach out to our therapist and get the skills that we need before we hit that crisis point. And we can't predict what time of day that's going to happen.
And it's usually not 8 to 4, Monday to Friday.
Yeah. And it's generally outside of those hours. Most likely outside of those hours. I mean, there's more I can say to it, but that's just like the essence of phone coaching. And then the last piece is that the therapist that you're working with sits on a consultation team. And the consultation team, we meet once a week as therapists and go over clients that we're working with. We structure it similar to how DBT individual sessions are structured, where we start with if there's any life-threatening behaviors or self-injury occurring, we target those cases first, and then we move into therapy interfering behaviors, quality of life issues, other topics consultation teams might throw on there. And I shortly had a stint of trying to provide DBT. I call it like a DBT informed treatment when I was working without a team. It was a very short period of time, maybe like 6 months. And I just found it's not, for me personally, just did not feel effective. Like to not have my team, to not have like the shared support of other people, but then also just for a place where, and maybe you might feel this like in your peer support groups, where you can drop in and you don't have to explain the backstory or like what you're kind of seeking. You can just go right into your language. You have shared community. People are on the same page of helping you be most effective in the room and show up the best way that you can for your clients. So it's really another essential. Sometimes I feel like that piece gets overlooked of like, oh yeah, it's these other things. Oh yeah, plus this thing. But I'm like, no, they're all really fundamental to, I think, providing most effective care we can.
So is that different than supervision? Or is it kind of the same?
There's going to be some overlap to it. But usually supervision will be, I guess it could be group. I was going to say it's usually more like one-on-one.
Yeah.
Like a clinician might work with another, expert in their field. They'll really, comb through working with one person, or they're struggling with a couple, maybe like an area of different things that are showing up clinically that they need some help on. So it's usually more like that one-on-one support. I would say the main difference is like on a consultation team, you're sharing that hour or the 90 minutes together, or 2 hours with other team members. So it's not going to be as like comprehensive, like robust.
Not about your situation, but about everything overall.
But enough to come in, get support, get like the help that you need. And then if you need more time, you can do like case reviews and things like that during consultation team, which is something we practice in our team. And I think a lot of teams practice that also. So there can be definitely some like overlap, or it can look similar.
For sure. And then, having the team also for the 24-hour phone call consultation, how do you even have a life without having a team when that's part of your work?
Yeah. Yes, the team is like such a wonderful resource. It helps it keep everything afloat, keep all the systems moving.
Yeah, for sure. So is the licensing across the world, or is it specifically like North America, the States? I feel like I hear about it most in the States.
Yes, there's definitely a big push in the States, but it is not confined to the States.
Yeah, because I also, part of me wonders, the access thing is hard for me, because maybe it's less of an issue in the States because you have like your insurance providers, and I think they provide more in terms of, obviously insurance is a privilege and not everybody gets insurance, but I think in the States, a lot of people have private insurance because you have to for medical things. In Canada, we have a public medical system. So, I can break my leg and go to the doctor and it's free, but mental health isn't included in that. So for us, it becomes, I think, a bigger challenge to be able to access things like comprehensive DBT, which is why you rarely see it. So like, for example, I have a good job. I'm well employed. I have a master's degree. I'm all, and I get $500 a year of counseling in my benefits. $500 a year is not very much. So if I were to try and access a full-time, like, or a comprehensive DBT program as a client, they'd be like, do you have however much? I don't even know, like 10 grand probably at least. And that would never be covered by my like extended health coverage, even though I have great coverage in theory. So yeah, I just don't see comprehensive here very much, except, in my local area, there's like the DBT Center of Vancouver. They do a lot of great work. They do comprehensive DBT, but it's paid. So if you have the cash, great. If you have somehow like absolutely incredible insurance, I've literally never met anybody that has insurance that good that could cover the full thing. Do you find that a lot of your clients do have the ability to access like your comprehensive program through their insurance, or are they paying out of pocket?
Accessibility for sure is a big issue.
Yeah.
With comprehensive programs, with mental health treatments in general.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And
it's just comprehensive is so comprehensive that it's not like you can go to a counseling session once a month or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that goes back to, so thinking about like the formation of the LBC, of like one thing to say like, hey, our clinicians doing TBT as it was designed, of course that's important. And then kind of going with that, one of the benefits of that is like over time, if let's say if insurance companies have a way of saying, how do I differentiate? Like if you research, if you look up therapists and you just type in DBT, you might get a huge swath of people. But to really be able to hone in and say, how does an insurance company be able to differentiate and be able to say like, do you
actually do DBT or did you take a course once? Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So how do they differentiate that? And one of the ideas behind that is if the more, and there is a whole committee that's their whole emphasis is legislative practices and trying to help push legislation to get this recognized and get people to know that this is happening. So accessibility can be opened up for more folks like using insurance for sure.
Yeah, it's so needed. I mean, I totally see the value in comprehensive DBT. It's literally just the access issue is so hard. I don't know if I know maybe like one or two Canadian people that I know with BPD that have done like full on DBT. And I've talked to a lot of people with BPD.
I bet you've talked to a lot of people for sure.
But again, it's literally like everybody would love it. It's just hard to find. Although I think there are now some hospital programs, like inpatient programs that do the full program. I'm just not aware of like the details. Yeah, I mean, you may not be able to answer this question. Of the components of DBT, what do you think is the most valuable?
Well, there is multiple things going through my mind right now as you ask that question, but without a doubt, skills are such a core component of DBT. And there is some, literature on the effectiveness of research or the effectiveness of skills across the board. So I think without skills, DBT would look so different of having this unique component. And what I love about skills and skills training is that it's very like portable, right? Like you can go to you can do modified versions of it. There's a whole push for DBT, getting DBT into the school systems.
Yeah. Please.
The states like Alec Miller is doing a lot of work with that. The Mazas are doing work. There's just so many different. So I guess my answer is skills for sure.
Yeah. I mean, again, I know they're all important, but if like there's one kind of shining component of it, I think it would be skills too, but it's tough.
Like going back to the accessibility part, is I think one of the core pieces is like as DBT becomes more widely used and spread, there's also like this kind of balance that, of course, the LBC is like pushing for certification and wants everyone to know that this is out there and be able to find it and access that information. And then there's also this like very like robust conversation internally about how do we make this more accessible. And if people can't find certified programs, what are the good questions that people can ask, like from the people who they are working with to know am I getting something that's like similar to this? Am I getting like the core material? Am I getting like Marsha's worksheets and handouts?
That's a great point. I love that.
Yeah. So I love like the trickle down effect too from like this bigger arching umbrella of certification, of like just getting more information out there to consumers and like ways of asking more, asking more questions, being able to make more informed decisions about it, kind of regardless of where they are.
That's such a great point, because my friends will often ask me to help them find therapists or whatever. And I'll go on Psych Info, and again, I live, breathe, eat, sleep DBT. So I always want people to do DBT, but I go on and I search for DBT, and I see like people go like, I do acceptance and commitment, CBT, DBT, EMDR. I literally can't think of any other one. 100 million different kinds. And you're like, how could you possibly be an expert in like 16 different modalities at once? And so I often wonder if, because you're searching for types of modalities often on those websites, people just put all of them. And then you could really get into a situation where you're like, if I went to a therapist that didn't know DBT, I would be able to tell that they didn't know DBT really quickly. But yeah, I think something like certification makes a lot of sense in that context, because you could go, I know that you've done the due diligence and somebody else has reviewed the fact that you actually know that, which is really interesting.
Just when you were saying that, what just sparked to my mind too is some verbiage, and I don't know if this is true in BC, if you see this also, but there's a couple of different words that kind of get thrown around, and one is adherence, or like adherent, or are you getting adherent DBT, you're getting comprehensive DBT or compliant DBT. And that can be kind of a little bit of a misnomer also, because what adherence is referring to is when we submit our product samples to be coded for certification, there's an adherence kind of checklist that they go through. Like, are certain things happening in the session? Did you structure your session a certain way?
Right.
That's kind of unique to DBT. So adherence is really referring to just like what's happening in one session. So you can't it's not possible to go in every session.
Yeah.
Or like an adherent program is like that. Those words like actually don't combine. So there's that comprehensive, or when someone's practicing DBT and they say, like, I'm doing this like to fidelity. So fidelity to the original materials, so fidelity, like how Marsha was, created this and her team. So even those, like, and maybe that's getting into like the weeds a little bit.
I love it.
But again, I think that's like really important for consumers to know, to be able to, like, again, like, how do you ask those questions, or how do you make sense of that when someone's pitching themselves a certain way? To say, well, what does that really mean? Or can you explain to me what that means, or how what your training is and what your background is, and how do I, as making that decision of what's going to be best for me, know the difference, how to differentiate between different backgrounds and trainings.
Do you have resources on your website for that? I don't remember seeing them, but I may have just missed it.
Yeah, the DBT-LBC's website has resources for that.
Okay, I'll link it below too, so people will see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that the LBC's mission, one of the things that they did is revamped our website. So now there's a lot more information on there for consumers. And then you can also look up programs that are certified, or clinicians who are certified on there. There's also a link for like blogs and podcasts that we're on, or webinars that we're hosting. So we're really trying to get more content out there and participate with more people also. So yeah, absolutely answers those questions.
Yeah, that's great. I'll have to find some of those resources and just like specifically link those below, because I think that's really important. And I also think just like awareness spreading at all is really important, because people don't necessarily know what certification means, right? They go, well, if you're telling me you're doing DBT, why wouldn't I believe you that you're doing DBT, right? Whereas if you don't actually like know what you're looking for, yeah, it's very different. Like, I recently read Marsha's like 1993 book, like the original text about DBT. Yeah, it's long. It's not short, but I was really surprised. I learned a ton in that book. I just read it like a couple months ago. And even just how you formulate sessions. And I was like, wow, I don't think I've ever actually done a DBT session before, like individual session before, because nothing I've ever done has been formulated in the way that it's kind of supposed to be. An interesting like way of understanding what is DBT and what's not. Because my individual therapist is amazing and she does a lot of DBT, but she's definitely not certified, I would think. I don't even know. I should know that.
Yeah. One thing that just made me think of is, you asked a little while ago, like what's like of all of the components, like what's, do you remember what the question was?
Yeah, like of all of the components, what's like the most important one? I don't know if that's exactly how I worded it, but something like that.
I wanted to reuse your words, and now I'm like,
I don't have it written down, so I have no idea.
But when you were just talking, that just reminded me of, what I think a lot of clinicians, and something that we feel really passionate about, and I'll use the royal we, but I can also just speak to my own experience here, that we know that DBT is a life-saving treatment for sure. And when I think about these components of treatment, or like working with a certified clinician or someone that has, extensive training in DBT and like maybe knows what adherence is and knows how to structure sessions, why that is so important really becomes apparent when we're working with really high risk people. So you can like think back to that time of, or can think of someone who's like really in crisis mode. And if they've read about DBT and they've read like, oh, this is the treatment that's going to work, and they end up with something that's different than what they were hoping for, that can be so damaging. Totally. So again, getting this information out to people. And then when people are in really tough times or in really dire straits or have tried lots of treatments, and that's where it kind of rises to the top of importance for me of what to look for, how to help families and other people support individuals in finding that also.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think to me that's one of the most important things too, is when I've heard a lot of people be like, DBT doesn't work. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know about that. Like, it definitely works. But I think it's even Marsha said this, and I don't remember what text it was from. It might have been from her memoir. I'm not sure. But she said, DBT, if it's not working, it might be because it's not the right time, not the right therapist, or sometimes it is just not the right treatment for you, but you can't necessarily like rule out this treatment as a whole if you're not actually getting the treatment as prescribed and as the research shows. So yeah, I think that's a really great, just like a really great point to make about the importance of this kind of thing, is that you know that you're not just getting some random person who's calling what they're doing DBT, because I'm sure there's a lot of that out there. So really quickly, I know we're almost out of time, but what is the actual like certification process? I know it's outlined on your website, but for people that aren't going to go to your website because they're not as nerdy as me, do you want to just quickly explain like how it kind of works?
Absolutely. I was just speaking with a group of students last week, and there was lots of questions about this, and it was lovely because I'm like, oh, this is a nice little prep for today to be able to talk about this concisely. Because I also think as in the mental health field, I think a lot of people are really used to being interested in a topic and then just pursuing getting a certificate in something, or getting continuing education around it, which is like a very important piece of our field and our work. And the Linehan Board of Certification process is its own thing. It's very different than most like kind of training programs or training structure. So this is not something that people will do right out of school, or like really when they're brand new to the field. What this looks like is once you've been working on a team for about a year, I think you have to have a minimum of a year of being on a team. And you have been working with clients who are stage 1 clients. This would be people who have any high-risk behavior, life-threatening behaviors occurring, and experience providing the comprehensive model to them. So you're working with someone who's in stage 1, they're in skills training, they're using phone coaching, you're sitting on a treatment team, you've had at least 3 clients in the last 2 years before you move to certification.
Right, because you have to provide your case notes for certification, right? For 3 clients?
Yeah, so at the very beginning, you submit an application. You submit some of your caseload examples. So you have to have at least 3 of those that you submit. And then once that application gets approved, you go into the next part, which is getting ready to take the test. So there's an actual test that we take. You go and sit into like a proctored exam. It's very anxiety provoking, but we get through it. I'm like, I forgot when I went because I sat into my test. I'm like, I forgot what this feels like. It's been such a long time since I've done this.
Totally, I bet.
So there's the exam component. So part of that's going to be based off of is Marsha's core text, behavioral principles in general. And then the third component is you submit your work product demonstration. So basically you record sessions of working with clients, and then coders go and codes 3 of those sessions. And if they pass if one of them passes for adherence, then it's a marker saying that you're doing DBT. That session passes the adherence marker and you get the check mark there. And then behind the scenes, there's other requirements. Like you have to have 40 hours of didactic focused on DBT. So it doesn't have to come from, it's actually another barrier that people will ask about. There's an assumption out there you have to be trained at a certain location or a certain spot. You don't have to be, you just have to have those hours of clinical experience and education. You also have to have mindfulness practice. So like ongoing
personal mindfulness practice.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So
awesome.
Some clinicians will sit and go on a retreat and have that as their core. Mm-hmm. Maybe they have a weekly community practice. So it's also showing our own commitment to the practice and really living the model. Yeah.
Which at the time I would have been absolutely not. But again, there's so much value to mindfulness. Once I'm in the right, now that I get it, I'm too bought in. It's kind of cringy how bought in I am now. It's just so good. Yeah. Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's also program certification. So that's when programs are providing comprehensive DBT. So that's a whole separate thing. There's different requirements. But at the core, teams would show that they're providing those 4 components. There's ways of reviewing that and looking at their program manual, how their team is structured, making sure that they are doing 24/7 coaching, all those things. So that's the program certification piece too. And that's growing also, getting more and more programs. Yeah. And
there's got to be a cost associated with getting certified, because that's a lot of work on the back end for you guys.
Yes. LBC, so the DBT-LBC is all led by volunteers. It's a nonprofit group. And these committees that that design the tests, who are doing the video coding, all of that is volunteers that are required to be certified themselves. And then we have, there's fees involved with that. And you also have to pay for the proctor tests as well.
Right. And then probably an ongoing licensing fee and stuff like that with all licenses.
Yeah, annual fees. So going back to accessibility, one of the barriers can be when the clinician is looking at this, maybe they're doing all these components. They're like, oh gosh, another thing I have to pay for, or it can just be expensive.
Yeah.
So there are scholarships. It's one thing I do want to mention.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know about that for individual certification, also program certification. There's scholarships available. So that's an important resource for people to know about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I can totally see people being it's either too much work or too expensive, and I just can't prioritize this right now. And so I'm really happy to hear that, because I think it does matter. And the fewer people that have kind of the I'm doing good DBT, doesn't matter if I'm certified, I think, it's kind of negates the purpose.
Yeah. The more accessible it can be, the more information is out there, and people are okay, I can do this. I'm already doing these things. And now I think the world of telehealth versus maybe when this certification first came out, accessibility for recording can be, as there's so many barriers that have been reduced there. So I think there's a lot of things working in our favor to get this momentum moving and become more global and accessible in so many more places. So that's
amazing.
That's all lovely.
Yeah, I love that there is a focus on accessibility just for the clinicians and for clients, because that is my number one thing It's just, you can have,
you are not alone in that.
Yeah, you can have like the most perfect therapy program in the entire world, but if nobody can access it, what's the point? So I'm really happy to hear that. Well, I know we're at time. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you're like, I really wanted to say and Lori didn't ask?
I did want to drop that there's going to be a new manual, an updated manual version coming out later this year. So
Exciting.
I have not seen it myself, but I've heard about it. It's like spreading the DBT community that's coming out. I think there's the worksheets and handouts are going to be organized in a slightly different fashion. Some of the language and examples are going to be updated. So I'm really looking forward to that coming out for people to know
when
about
was
that.
The last time it was updated?
Oof, that's a good question.
Like a long time ago. I'm pretty sure it still talks about cassettes at some point. Which there are literally people listening to this that don't know what a cassette is.
No.
Yeah, yes. That's so cool. Oh, amazing. I'm gonna, even though I'm not a clinician, I'm gonna read that for sure.
And then the other thing is that anyone's listening who's interested in DBT, and you don't have to be a clinician for this, just anyone who's like benefit from DBT or just knows about it, wants to get involved. Again, this is all volunteer. The LBC exists because of volunteers. So people are interested in volunteering. There's lots of different committees, and that's on the website as well. So there's lots of ways to get involved and just, get back to that community or be in community with the other DBT like-minded people. So know that that's an option for people out there.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that a friend of mine, Alyssa, is a volunteer with you guys. Yeah, so that's really cool. Okay, final question for you. What is your favorite DBT skill?
This is a great question, and my skills group asked me this. So, right now we're in distress tolerance, and we are about to do mindfulness of thought. And if I could take one skill and give it to the world, it would be this mindfulness of thought, for sure.
Interesting. Okay, do you want to elaborate on what that means for people that have never heard of that skill before?
Yes. If you can go back to your younger self and you thought about learning about mindfulness, and you're like, not for me. I cannot tolerate this. Or like, nope, not the time.
Mm-hmm.
We've all been there, and myself included. And I remember when I first learned this skill, so the essence of it is we have so many thoughts a day. And I like to ask my skills group members this, how many thoughts a day do you think you have? And I get a variety of different answers.
Yeah.
And just no matter how many thoughts you think that you have a day, there's just no way from like a statistical perspective that they're all facts about the world. They can't be, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, we have certain thoughts and we believe them to be true, and we don't maybe check them. We don't have that awareness, or we can get so embedded in our thoughts, like so immersed in like the way we're thinking or our narratives or what's happening. And as humans, we all know that experience of that when our mood shifts, or the way that we're thinking shifts, right? Like when I'm feeling kind of gray, maybe my thoughts are gray. When I'm feeling really shiny and lovely and bubbly, my thoughts are reflective of that. And so the skill is really, how do we become more of an observer of our thoughts and see that they're not, set in stone, that there's so much change and flux within them? And how do we be more of the observer of that versus like totally immersed in it and entrenched in it? There's just, I could go on and on. There's so much power in that. It can be so helpful. Yeah. And then having that awareness too also can help guide us into what we need to be more effective. Like in this moment or in today, or wow, I'm like really not being present because so much is on my mind. Oh, can I observe that, notice that, and then come back? Like, oh, it's an ongoing practice.
Beautiful. That's such a good one. I feel like I have not heard anybody say that that's their favorite before. So that's a unique answer. I love it.
Right. Yes. You want me to check it out again?
Yeah, 100%. There's always things that I've forgotten exist. Thank you so much, Meredith, for coming on. It's been really great chatting with you. And I'll make sure to link all of the stuff we talked about in the show notes so people can find it. And yeah, if you think about any other resources you want me to link, just send me an email and I can add them too. Thank you so much for listening to the Superfeeler podcast. This episode was recorded on the traditional and unceded territory of the Matsqui and Sumas First Nations. If you'd like to learn more about the Superfeeler podcast, share your story, or participate in the Superfeelers Club, which is our peer support group, it's totally free, virtual, and open to anyone who experiences intense emotions or has borderline personality disorder, please check out the link in our show notes or go to laurieedmondson.com. If you would like to support the show, we would very much appreciate it. There's an option to do monthly small donations at whatever denomination you'd like, and you get bonus content, extra resources, and extra connection to me throughout. That can be found on patreon.com/superfeeler, or again in the notes below. Thanks again, and have a great day.